Least effect. No doubt.
We got, wow, that's a sharp shirt you got. We got the sleeves rolled over. Phew.
After we get the baseball scores, we have a little fashion part of the show. There's no news. Part of the show. Just sports and fashion.
We had some weather earlier.
Weather. We had weather. That's true.
Oh, we had weather.
Yeah, I mentioned that it was wintry outside.
Only here.
I had to stand under the bus stop so I wouldn't get rained on this morning.
Is it raining out
A
there?
little bit. It's spitting. Okay. Now we're on to Lag Ba'omer. Having learned the Indian of Machos Shabbos yesterday, V'zeu gam kein ha'shaychus de Lag Ba'omer la'aved de Sfir Seimer. Bottom of page 57. Again, if anybody wants a better copy of the Maimon, I know it's near the end, but it's much more readable. So there is this.
Very nice, very nice.
Isn't that nice? You only want two, Doc? One for your right eye, one for your left eye?
That's right. Well, I could write with two
It's
hands.
free. You might as well take two. What difference does it make?
That's good because I can write with two hands.
Yeah, I know. We saw that.
Right.
We saw that.
Yeah. I did.
It's exciting. Zeu gam kein ha'shaychus de Lag Ba'omer la'aved de Sfir Seimer. And again, the question arises, why Lag Ba'omer is this incredibly special day? Lag Ba'omer is the day of the passing of the Rashbi, and it's the day that the Rashbi revealed the deepest Torah that's ever been revealed. So, what's the Shaychus de Sfir Seimer? That could happen. That could be in Shvat. It could be in Kislev. Why is it Dafka in Iyar? Why is it Dafka in Sfir Seimer? And why is it Dafka Hoyt B'Hoyt?
Sorry, for the timeline, did the Rashbi pass away first, or did Rabbi Akiva's students stop passing away first?
Rashbi was left from the students,
Oh, okay.
as far as I understand. V'zeu gam kein ha'shaychus Lag Ba'omer la'aved de Sfir Seimer. Dehine Lag Ba'omer hu Sfiras Hoyt B'Hoyt. Right, we mentioned that before. It's not what's Hoyt. Hoyt is Hoda'ah. Hoda'ah means to admit something, to say thank you, Todah. If you say thank you, you're expressing a certain level of bittul to someone, which is why some people have a hard time saying thank you, because they don't want to admit that they actually depended on someone else for something else, right? But Hoda'ah is an Indian in bittul. Also, if I made it to someone, I agree with them. In other words, we have two different positions, and I made it to them. That means I admit that their position is more reasonable than mine. That's also something that can be hard to do for a lot of people, some people, whatever. Dine lag be'emu b'sfiras hoyt b'hoyt. The inyan of hoda'ah, b'chalal, what's hodah? Shumeida, af she'enu mevin. There's two different levels, we'll see. There's going to be two different levels of the notion of hoda'ah. That a person is made it to someone else or feels a certain bittul to someone else because he understands intellectually why it is he should be bottled to that person. Or a person is bottled simply because he's bottled. He can't explain it to you intellectually. But he understands that this is someone to whom he should be made there. Okay. Whether or not he understands or doesn't understand. Amnam, b'sfir sahoid gufa yesh beis darkness. The Indian of Hoda'ah is love dafka based on the fact that I understand the position of the other one. I just, if I would assume that if Dr. November told us something medically that contradicted something we had assumed was the case, we would just say, oh, okay. Why? Well, I wouldn't necessarily understand why he's right, but I would assume he's right because he's a doctor and I'm not, right? So he knows something about that and I don't. Okay, now, this, I understand doctors and rabbis are the two people that complete ignoramuses are allowed to disagree with. on the subject that they know best. Okay, the Seder, that's just the way it is. Okay, but that being said, a normal, healthy person, if they hear a piece of information from an expert in a particular field, even if they don't understand why it is that this particular piece of information is true, and it might contradict their preconceived notions, which weren't necessarily based on anything, but so they'll probably, I mean, again, a normal, healthy person will be mated that that's probably the truth, because that person seems to know that particular field of study, and I don't. Right? Okay. So that doesn't mean I understand why it is that what he's saying is true, because I don't understand enough to know why it is what he's saying is true. Right? I just assume it is because he seems to know what he's talking about. Okay. Now that people can fake it and make me think they know what they're talking about. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about real people. Okay. So that's called Hoida'ah. So that can be expressed whether or not I understand or don't understand. I'm numb. B'sfir Sahed Gufi Yesh Beis Darkes. There are two different levels of Hoida'ah. V'yuvin Ze Al Derech Dugma Mi Chochem Gadol. There's a great Chochem. Shenifla Mi Ein Kol B'Chochmasa, who's greater than everybody else in his Chochem. Right? Greatest Torah scholar of the generation. Shegam Chochem Katan, even a small Chochem, meaning someone who knows a lot of Torah, he would be called a Talmud Chochem, but he's not in any way, shape, or form on the level of this person. Shebechlal yesh lo shaychus l'seichel, this person has a relevance to intellect. Hine, gam hu eino mevin chochmoso nifla shel chochem gadol. He doesn't necessarily understand the great chochma of the chochem gadol. The chochem gadol might say something that's so sophisticated that this chochem katan doesn't understand it. Now, he generally does understand things because we're calling him a chochem katan. But this particular idea he doesn't understand. Hine, hachochem katan, kevin sheyesh lo shaychus l'seichel, since he has relevance to seichel, meaning he doesn't know how to think, he doesn't understand things. Hine, av she'ena mevin es seichel, sheshama mi hachochem gadol, even though he doesn't understand the particular idea that he heard from the chochem gadol, but since he's a person who works within the construct of seichel, nevertheless, what he does understand, and he understands this al pi seichel, he does understand shu inyan sichli mufla b'yesur. He understands this is an unbelievably sophisticated idea, which he doesn't understand yet. Now he might work hard to come to an understanding, okay, but he doesn't understand it yet. So somebody who knows how to learn some Chassidus, and he opens up a very sophisticated mimer of the Rebbe or the Rebbe Shab, whoever, he opens up ayin base, and he just puts himself in the middle of ayin base. Okay, so he learns this, he goes, whoa, I don't understand this at all. This is real, this is a whole new level of Chassidus. I've never encountered anything quite like this. Okay, but his appreciation of that is actually based on the fact that there are things that are sophisticated, that he does understand. That's why he's buttle to the author of that particular mimer, to the Rebbe Shab in our case. Why? Because he appreciates that this is a level of Chassidus beyond anything he's ever learned. Even though he doesn't understand it, right? But he doesn't assume it's wrong because he doesn't understand it. He assumes it's right. Well, this is a chochem gadol, okay? But that doesn't mean he understands the idea. But his appreciation of the idea is coming from his seichel, because he usually does understand ideas. That's why he appreciates the greatness of this idea. Shilinian sichli mufla b'yesur. Dibamelo. Even though he doesn't understand this particular idea that he just learned, he's made it that he has to be bottled to the source of this idea. Why? The cave and margi shuinyan sichli, that since he feels that this is a very, very deep idea, this is an idea. It's an intellectual reality. The sichli mufla b'yesur. And it's a wondrous, incredibly sophisticated idea. And he appreciates ideas. He thinks a lot. He learns a lot. He knows a lot. This chochem katan. But meilu mevin, therefore he understands intellectually. And it's not just intellect. I mean, he's bottled to this person. If this person were to walk in the room, he'd sit down and listen to anything he had to say. wants to learn from that person. Why? Because he appreciates the greatness of that person. Even though he might not necessarily appreciate the specific idea that he heard from that person. The reason he's so amazed by this person is because he didn't understand it, because he realized that this person is on a whole different level than he is relative to the understanding of ideas like this. But he's into ideas. Who may even battle even though he doesn't know or comprehend this particular idea. But again, he understands how great the idea is. That's one level. Then there's another person. Now, interesting, this guy also doesn't understand the idea. Still ain't no maybe. But he's a chacham. He's a chacham. So he appreciates intellectually how great this idea must be because he can't understand it.
Rabbi, is it a function of the fact that the person realizes how intellectual the giver over of the, or is it?
Right? Yes. He's
That.
bottled to the intellect of that person.
Okay.
Because he works on a level of intellect. Doesn't mean he's some sort of geek who can't say hello to anybody. It's just that he appreciates intellect. So he appreciates the intellect of this person. So he goes, even though I don't understand fully what I just heard, I barely understand what I realize this is a whole new level of understanding that I've never encountered before. So it'll be bottled to that person. Yeah, that's real. Right? But again, the bittul, so it's an expression of hoid, hoda'ah, admission that that person is greater than him and that idea is true. That's happening. But the source of that is where he's holding in seichel. Not in a bad way, just who he is. He understands things, but he doesn't understand this. When the Alter Rebbe was 12 years old, and he gave a shiur in Hilchos, we're all thinking about Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh now because we're all suffering in the Rambam. Right, that he gave a shiur on Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh when he was 12 years old to a bunch of adults. Now they were all Talmidei Chachamim, right? They're all sitting there listening to the shiur, and they were just completely amazed at what he was saying. Not that they understood everything he was saying. That's exactly why. I mean, it's a part of halacha that's very, very difficult. But they were just absolutely amazed at the fact that he understood what he understood. Okay, so that's hoy, but that's coming from their seichel. Again, not in a bad way, in a good way. They appreciate the brilliance of this young boy. The fact that he was 12 also makes it more exciting. Okay, but even if he was 25, if you've ever heard a shiur on Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh, so it's just there's a gentleman in Crown Heights, Rabbi Losh, who runs a trucking company. And when the Rebbe came out with the union of learning Rambam every day, so the first time we made it to Kiddush HaChodesh, he decided, which is a perfectly reasonable decision, that he has to figure out what this all means. So he's learning this Rambam, doesn't have a clue what the Rambam is saying. So he just sat down and figured out all the calculations, and he's a complete, he wrote a book on it. He's an expert, and he runs a trucking company. It's not like a trucking company, he sits in an office. He has a truck. Right? Lush trucking. There might be two. I don't know how many trucks. I've only seen one. It's one of the Gaboim in 770. He's a very special guy. Originally Israeli. So I remember once he was visiting his parents here in Eretz Yisrael, and he came to the yeshiva I was teaching in, and he taught the Bakrim the basics of Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh, and he had a few diagrams that he played with, etc. And it was just absolutely fascinating. He was explaining all the movements that the Rambam discusses in the book, and he, you could actually see it. So now he has a whole. He gives a shiur to the Bakrim in 770 every year. When we start learning Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh, we just started where we hold in Yud Tes. So we started. Today? We'll get up to Yud Tes, I think. Yud Tes, maybe Chaf, whatever. So
Finishes today.
So what?
The finishes today.
Finished Baruch Hashem. Right? So, but I think the last chapter was Yud Zayin. Is that right? I think the last chapter was Yud Zayin. So, so 7 days ago, 7 days ago, he showed up in 770 and gave a shiur, and I just saw a picture of him teaching his shiur, and he now has a whole thing that it's not just drawing on a board. He has stuff that he uses. But he mamish sat down to learn it. So when you listen to him, you're just completely bottled to and they're not so much bottled to his brilliance, right? Because he's no more brilliant than anybody else. What are you bottled to? His perseverance to sit down and do something that no one else has taken the time to do. Figure out the Rambam's Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh. And you're bottled to that perseverance. Like, wow, he did it. First year, right? First year of learning Rambam Dalet. And he knows it. He really knows it. Wrote a book on the Rambam's Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh. Who knows Rambam Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh? Who knows? If you've ever seen it, So it's not easy. It's all calculations. It's a test in patience. Okay, he did it. Okay, so that's that. Now, who's going to appreciate that? The two people can appreciate that. Someone who's never heard of Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh and goes, "Wow, this is interesting. This guy knows a lot." Or someone who has learned the whole rest of Rambam and also learns Kiddush HaChodesh every year and is blown away that Lush actually understands it, right? And he doesn't. He's a chacham. He can learn the Rambam. He can learn. He learns the rest of the Rambam. Sefer Torah, he also has problems with. Okay, okay, but there's someone else. Mashenke, the Rebbe says, what, 7th line? Ish Pashut. What about a simple person? Now, the Rebbe is obviously using an example of someone, who's an extreme expression of the Ish Pashut. Doesn't mean he's stupid. He's not stupid. He's just not intellectual in any way, shape, or form. People often think that those two go together, and that's just so not true. There are a lot of intellectuals who aren't particularly bright. They just worked very hard on understanding things, and they do understand things. But they were taught to think like an intellectual. Right? And there are other people who just don't think that way. That's just not how they work. That doesn't mean they're stupid, but they're okay. So this person probably didn't have much of an education either, right? The person that the Rebbe is describing. So he might be, theoretically very bright, but he doesn't know a lot, right? And he also doesn't have a connection to Seichel because he's never really been given the opportunity to learn very much. There's no shaykhis to Seichel. He doesn't think that way. That's not how his life works. About him, it's impossible to say. Right? That he understands intellectually why he should be bottled to the Chacham Gadol. It's not an intellectual decision because that's not how he works. He doesn't work with intellect per se. And he doesn't appreciate how much greater this idea is than any other idea. Right? An example of that, and it's really, I've mentioned this before, and that doesn't mean that I've done tshuva and do it. But Rabbi Majeski is a very, very special Yid, lives in New York, wrote a book on Simcha that you might have seen. Right? Very, very, really Chassidish guy. So, he runs he used to run a school called Machon Chana, and now he runs a school called Machon Liyadus for Balei Tshuva in Crown Heights. And I don't know, in the last 3-4 years, how many shidduchim have been made between guys from Mayanot who've gone to Crown Heights and married young ladies who learned in Machon Liyadus. I mean, numerous shidduchim have been made because it's a really, it's just a good school. Yeah, so, and he's a very, very special person. So I remember sitting with him, this was 25, 30 years ago. I remember sitting with him in the office of Machon Chana in the old days, and we were discussing teaching Chassidus, etc. So he took out a packet like this, only it was much bigger. In the front of the packet was the mimer. Then there were a few pages probably a page of difficult words in the mimer translated into English. And then the part that I really found impressive, every pasuk quoted in the mimer with the basic pshat of the pasuk as you'd find it in Mikros Gedelis on Chumash or on Nach. I mean, what does this pasuk mean in pshat? And then see what Chassidus did with the pasuk. Then you appreciate the Chassidus much more. So if I don't do that, I'm like the Ish Pashut. I've never really heard pshat in this pasuk anyway, so the only thing I've heard is this idea. This is an amazing idea, but I don't appreciate the idea as much as I could if I knew more. If I knew what Rashi, the Radak, the Ralbag, what they say about this pasuk in Nach, so then I appreciate how Chassidus is taking this pasuk and using the pasuk in a completely different way and explaining it in a completely different way. That's so much deeper and more relevant to whatever subject we're talking about. Okay. So but the Ish Pashut, someone who never looked at the pasuk is an Ish Pashut relative to that pasuk, right? So that he'll just, oh wow, that's an interesting idea. Even if he does have a connection to Sefer, still relative to that pasuk he doesn't. Oh wow, that's an amazing pshat in the pasuk. Well, it's not pshat in the pasuk. Go see what Rashi says pshat in the pasuk, and then you'll appreciate even more what Chassidus says about the pasuk. Right? So I've always been impressed that he did that. That doesn't mean that I've ever done tshuva and did it myself, but it's not, Mashenken ish pashut. So there's no shaykhis to seichel. So therefore you can't say that he understands intellectually, that this person is so obviously an incredible expert in this field. He doesn't appreciate that because that's not how he works. Ki'im, ha'idov bittul shalai, but he's still bottled to this chacham gadol. Why? The reason he's Meida is because he's Meida. The Rebbe will explain. Meaning his Haidah is not coming from Bittul, from Bina, from understanding. His Haidah is coming from the ability of a person to appreciate the greatness of another person and feel buttle to that person, even though that's not coming from my intellectual appreciation of who that person is. It's coming from somewhere more basic. Haidah, because Haid is a power of the soul. Haid is one of the midas. That means each and every one of us has the ability to experience that relative to someone else, also relative to the Eibishter, obviously, but relative to someone else. The Moshe we're bringing is someone else. Even though I don't necessarily appreciate intellectually why I should be bottled, because I don't appreciate the uniqueness of the idea, because I don't think that way. Or I know nothing about that subject. But it's rather obvious that this person is a great person. Okay. I'm not referring to Rav Soloveitchik as a Chacham Katan. But when Rav Soloveitchik came to a huge Shvat for Brengen by the Rebbe, he said he was going to be there for 15 minutes. He just wanted to make a public statement of support for the Rebbe because there was someone else who he referred to. There's a particular Rosh Yeshiva here in Eretz Yisrael who's making a lot of noise against the Rebbe, and Rav Soloveitchik wanted to make a public show of support for the Rebbe, and especially because he said that the Lubavitcher Rebbe knows more in one finger than this man knows in his whole body. So he went to a Farbrengen. Just it's famous. The Rebbe, Rav Soloveitchik speaking. So he stayed for 2 hours. And the rabbi who drove him home was also, it was relative to the two of them is a Chacham Katan, but he's a real Talmud Chacham, Rabbi Hershel Schechter. He was a Rosh Yeshiva. Rabbi Schechter drove Rav Soloveitchik home, and he tells the story. He asked the Rav why we were supposed to be there for 15 minutes. So now this is Rav Soloveitchik. Rav Soloveitchik heard his grandfather, Rav Chaim Brisk, teach Torah when he was a little boy. Right? It's not that he hasn't heard people teach Torah. He said, I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen anybody sit in a room with no books and just talk and walk through the world of Torah from Kabbalah to Midrashim to Gemaras to Halacha to Rashi. I never saw anything like that. I couldn't tear myself away. Never seen anything like it. Okay, so that's, now I'm not calling Rabbi Soloveitchik a Chacham Katan, but he's calling himself a Chacham Katan relative to what he saw by the Rebbe. He was completely bottled to the Rebbe based on what he saw, right? But he appreciated it intellectually. So I've seen Chacham in my life. I've never seen anything like that. Never seen anybody do that. Right? No books. The Rebbe talked for 5 hours with no boss. And it's not like the Rebbe talks like we talking if we're bringing a little story here and, talk about a Sikha. No, the Rebbe's quoting Chazals and quoting their, you've seen it. Okay. So no one does that. Someone does. So I there's now what about a person who's sitting in that room who's basically never learned Torah before? What will their relationship be to the event? They'll also be bottled to the event. They'll realize, whoa, this person's completely different than anybody I've ever met. Do they appreciate the Torah they're hearing? No, they've never heard Torah before. How can they appreciate the Torah? Right? But what they're appreciating is that they have an ability in their soul to realize that this is someone I should be bottled to. This is someone I should appreciate greatly and see as greater than myself. Right? So now, Reb Soloveitchik said, said that he's never seen this. In other words, he was saying the Rebbe is greater than I've ever seen. In other words, I assume he would include himself in that. Fine, okay. He's allowed to say that. It happens to be the respect was mutual. It was the only time we ever saw the Rebbe stand up for anybody was when Reb Soloveitchik left. When Reb Soloveitchik stood up to leave, the Rebbe stood up.
Wow.
Never saw that by anybody. A lot of people came to Fabregas. Saw the Rebbe accompany people out of 770 and stand while they left, but no one ever saw the Rebbe stand up in Fabregas for anybody. First, the Rebbe Solomon went over to the Rebbe, but then the Rebbe stood up until he left, and when he left, the Rebbe sat back down. They knew each other. They had met in college in Europe. So they both went to college. They met in college. I'm sure they played ping pong in Hillel House together.
Is the story of someone seeing the Rebbe study Mishnayos during class and then
It might be Reb Soloveitchik. The Rebbe used to have a sefer open during class and then would ask questions of the lecturer. But he was sitting and learning all the time. That's what they say. I don't know. I'm sure Reb Soloveitchik was doing the same thing. I don't imagine he was listening. Right? The Rebbe was there because the Friedrich Rebbe made him go. The Rebbe didn't want to go. The Rebbe told him, no, you have to go. Why? Who knows? The Rebbe told him to go, so he went. So the Chacham Katan, and again, I've said it 3 times. I'm going to say it again because I don't want to be misquoted, right? Because unfortunately that can happen a lot, right? I am not saying Rav Soloveitchik is a Chacham Katan, just bringing him as an example of this relative to his experience by the Rebbe and the way he described the experience. He's describing it from a place of wisdom, not from a place of simplicity. Right? Appreciating what he saw mitzad his understanding of it all. Right? So that's the chacham, as opposed to the ish pashut. The ish pashut just sees something that he realizes is greater than him, even though he doesn't understand exactly why and can't appreciate the details of it all. I'm sorry. Mashen ken ish pashut shein l'shaych is called l'seichel hine alav. We'll the Rebbe's going to explain this. The etzel hacham katan by the person who understands things. Hine habittel v'hoid shaloi, his bittel to the chacham gadol, who mitzad seichel comes to the fact that he appreciates intellectually the greatness of this particular teacher. Aval etzel ish pashut. His hoidah, lo mitzad Chabad. It's not mitzad Chochmah Bina V'das. It's not mitzad his seichel. It's not mitzad his intellect. He doesn't understand intellectually how this person is greater than anybody he's encountered before. Doesn't think that way. Doesn't appreciate that and doesn't understand that. But when mitzad Chagas, it's not even mitzad the 3 main powers of emotion: Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. It's not a function of some sophisticated emotional attachment. What is it? A simple expression of the ability of someone to appreciate the greatness of someone else. the midah of hoid, which is a midah of the nefesh. We have the ability to appreciate someone else if we open up to things.
This is for the second person.
It's the ish pashut, you know. Ki'im, rather, behoid gufa. In hoid itself. Shumitzad hoda'a ba'alma. A basic, general, again, the word hoda'a can be thanks, admission. I mean, in this context, Rebbe is talking about it in terms of bittul. I'm meida, meaning I'm bottled to you. I'm bottled to you if I made it to your idea, if I agree with your idea. That means my intellect is bottled to your intellect because I realize your idea is a better idea than my idea. Okay. I'm bottled to you to the extent that I required your services, so I'll say todah, same word. Again, some people have a very hard time doing that because they refuse to deal with the fact that they might actually depend on another person. No, I can do it all myself. Stupid position. Right? Okay. So say thank you. No, some people have a very hard time. Please and thank you. Right? Okay. That's why it's so important to teach your children to say please and thank you. Right? But you know, as soon as a kid learns how to talk, what do we tell them to say? Tagi toda. Tagi toda. Right? Notice that someone just helped you. It's actually another person in the room. Be aware of that. Right? Okay. And it's cute when they say toda. They don't get what they're doing yet. That's hoid, be'etzem, no seichel, just hoid. Right? Okay. Shazeu inyan, hoid shebaid. That's hoid shebaid. Oh, so now the Rebbe is going to say something which you say all the time and you might have never noticed, but you know, that's why we learn things. K'mei she'emim b'nusach d'meidim d'Rabbanan. Meidim d'Rabbanan. The meidim that we say when the Shaliach Tzibur says the regular meidim that we already said, when he says that, we have something called meidim d'Rabbanan. And what do we say in meidim d'Rabbanan? Baruch Hashem, there's a siddur right here. And in meidim d'Rabbanan, what do we say? Right? We say something very interesting. We say meidim anachnu lach, etc., 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 etc. And at the end of it all, what do we say? Al shanu meidim lach. We're made it to you because we're made it to you. What do you mean we're made it to you because we're made it to you? We're made it. I mean, there's all this stuff in the beginning, in the middle, but the basic haidah is meida al shanu meidim lach. We're made it because we're made it. That's how you behave. Right? Say it every day, right? And when you say that, what do you do the whole time you're saying it? You're bent over, right? You don't say it and then pick yourself up and say it. And the regular meidim, interesting enough, we bow at the beginning and we don't stay bowed. This meidim, we stay bowed, the whole meidim. It's hoid b'hoid, complete bittul. Manyan. Banusat the meidim d'Rabbanan, meidim anachnu lach, al sha'anu meidim lach. We're made because we're made. Hoid b'hoid. Why am I hoid? Because I'm hoid. Hoid b'hoid. Hoda'ah because of hoda'ah, not hoid chochma. No, not hoid b'bina. No, hoid b'hoid, which is a power of the soul. Interestingly enough, the ability to be bottled to something, the ability to acknowledge something else. I made it to it. I acknowledge it. I acknowledge its greatness. I might even be able to acknowledge its superiority. Okay, that's bittul. If I appreciate the fact that this thing is superior to me, so then I'll be bottled to that thing, that person, reality, whatever it happens to be. Shazewin in hoid b'hoid, meidim d'Rabbanan is hoid b'hoid. One of the there's a lot of difficult aspects to davening from the Amud for a year in a year of Avelis. The whole thing is just very, very hard. And I know we have someone doing it now and he makes it sound easy, but it's really hard. You just have to be there every day, and no matter how you feel, you have to stand up there, and it's just really hard. And yeah, he's in good shape, right? He doesn't have to look for minyanim. He has ready-made minyanim. Very often you have to look for minyanim. It's just a very difficult year. One of the things that's also really hard, you almost never say Meidin Durabana, which is such a beautiful davening. That's one of the beautiful things about Shabbos is you're not davening from the Ummah, so you get the same Meidin Durabana. Because you don't say it the whole year. And it's such a beautiful davening. So that's also, that's not as hard as everything else, but that's a hard part of it also. And Shabbos and Yom Tov and Rosh Chodesh are such great days because not only do you have to not go up there and you can actually sit down for Birchas Kriya Shema, but you get to say Meidin Durabbanan, which you miss a lot when you don't get to say it, right? Which you don't ever think about, but then you realize we haven't said Meidin Durabbanan for a long time. Oh, once a week, a few times a week on Shabbos. Chol Hamoed, what a blast every day. Shazeu inyan hoyche b'hoid. V'lochein hine, man delay kara b'meidim, what a Chazal says, someone who doesn't bow in meidim, someone who can't bow down, ain't a come b'tchiyas amesim. It's not shaykh t'chiyas amesim, not shaykh t'elokus. Doesn't have the most basic bittul possible. It's basic bittul, hoyche b'hoid, the basis of it all. The Kashein loy, what's another Maimer Chazal, which is going to come up later. To Maimer Misha loy Karamein Nasa Shidrosei Nachash. His backbone becomes like a snake. What's a snake? A snake is the opposite of bittul. The Nachash is the opposite of bittul, right? He's brought about the sense of Yeshus in the world. He's the source of all the Yeshus in the world. It's a das. The kashein lo yediyah sheyesh, when he has no understanding, intellectual understanding, yesh lo yadayim tikva. There's still hope. The person can still be bottled to godliness. Shadu yerdei al kol panim shetzarich lahides. At least he understands. And again, even the ish pashut, he's not an intellectual, but it's not that he doesn't understand anything. So what does he appreciate? He appreciates the fact that he should be bottled to something. And very, very often it's the ish pashut who finds it easier to be bottled because the ish Chacham is sometimes so impressed by his own Chacham that he can't be bottled to anything. He'll never let his Chavrusa be right. Can't do it. It's an affront to his appreciation of his own wisdom. So fight, even though his Chavrusa said a better pshat in the Gemara, and I don't fight for his worst pshat. Why? It's got to be me. So that's the opposite of bittul. That's the opposite of hoid. But what does the Ish Pashut understand? He's got to be made. He's got to acknowledge the greatness of this person, of this being, if it's the Eibishter. And if this there isn't, at least he can bring about it himself. He'll be made without any understanding. Halter l'kol hapachos, at least he can hold by halter. He's holding l'kol hapachos, at least by madregas ha'ijabahid, which is we're going to see that's the lowest, most basic madrega in a connection to elukus. Ha'ijabahid, the lowest of the low. But if there's no ha'ijabahid, there's nothing. There's no relationship. Ha'ijabahid is the most basic, as we'll see. Rebbe's going to explain that. He said the mead of Ha'ij B'Haid in Sfir Seimer, and that's Taka Lag B'Hamer, which is really interesting. So Ha'ij B'Haid is the most basic requirement. That what? The ability to be meider, the ability to acknowledge, and in terms of the Eibishter, the ability to acknowledge the Eibishter as Eibishter. Why? I can't explain it to you. I don't know why. It's just that's the way it is. Of Amanda loy karab made him someone who can't acknowledge the Eibishter, can't bow down to the Eibishter in any way, shape, or form, can't say thank you to the Eibishter. Even the most basic appreciation of the source of everything that we get to enjoy, nasa shidrase nachash. what his backbone becomes, his backbone, which is the part that's supposed to be bent over, becomes like the nachash. What? Ki ein le shaychus klal l'kedusha. He has no relevance to holiness in any way, shape, or form. Shari ein lo gam madrega yeser achreinu shebaveda. He doesn't even have the last level of an avodah, which the Rebbe is going to explain why Hajj is the last level of an avodah. Because it's not the end of Spheres Aimer. It's Hajj, but what about Yisoid? What about Malchus? So we'll see. The Rebbe is going to explain that in a minute. But Hajj is the most basic appreciation of the fact, and again, we'll talk about it in terms of the Eibishter, the most basic appreciation of the fact that there's an Eibishter. Can you explain that intellectually to someone? No. But what does the person know? It just is. I don't know why. It just is. Now, obviously, you're supposed to get to a more sophisticated place than that. That's the basis of it all. Bittul because I can be button. And that's the power of the soul. Should I get to a higher place and be able to appreciate it more in a more sophisticated way? Absolutely. But without Hajj B'Haid, there's nothing. What's Hajj B'Haid? Basic bittul, basic Kabbalah soul. Right? And the Rebbe, it's interesting because the Maimon that we've learned before in here, I think we've done it for a while. Did we do Leis Mishakela this year? I don't remember. I don't think so. So Leis Mishakela, so the Mishpatim Tavshin Yud Beis, so the Rebbe talks about Yira, Kabbalah soul. He says something so interesting. The basic level of Yira is that even though this isn't my Rotzain, it's not my Seichel, I don't want this, I don't understand it, I still do it. Why? God said so. Mitzad my own Rotzain, I'd rather do something else. Right? I'd rather not say Tachnun. When you tell me not to say Tachnun, I get so excited. I look forward. Next Monday, it's Pesach Sheni, no Tachnun. Next Monday, it's a long Tachnun. Wow! Break out the champagne. Okay? But if you tell me I have to say Tachnun, I'll say Tachnun. Why? Because I think you say Tachnun. I like saying Tachnun. I can't say I enjoy saying Tachnun. Right? Meaning I like the days when you don't have to. Right? Less in Shachris. Shachris, okay, there's a lot going on, and Baruch Hashem, Tachnun is nice, especially when you're behind in davening on a Monday or Thursday, you want to catch up to hear Kriyas Torah, so they're all busy saying Tachnun, Baruch Hashem, they're saying Tachnun, so you can catch up and say Shemon Esrei. Well, okay, good, fine. That's good. You're going to say Tachnun afterwards. But when is Tachnun really something you'd rather not say? Kriyas Shalamita, because it makes you stand up. It's the end of the day, right? You say Rebbeinu Shalom, and you say everything you have to say, and when you don't say Tachnun, so you can say the whole thing sitting down, which is very, very nice. You don't have to stand up, but if you have to say Tachnun, you get up in the middle. So the person's halfway sitting down by the time he's at Kuf. He's almost sitting down again. Right. It's those three toughs. He has to hold himself above the chair. He's down. Right? Okay. Okay. Right. So Tachnun is the ultimate in Avda Befkera Nichale. The Eved is more than happy with Hefkeres. If you tell the Eved he doesn't have to work today, he's more than happy. But if you tell him he has to work, he'll do exactly what you tell him he has to do. Now, obviously, there's greater levels of relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu than that. But that's the basis of it all. Right? I don't want it. I don't understand it. But you do it. Why? Because God said so. Kabbalah is all. Reishis Avedi Vikara V'Shash. The beginning of Avedi. Everything's based on that. If I don't have that, I don't have a relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Because if I'm not doing it because the Eibishter wants, so then even if I have sophisticated understanding and I love it and I'm into it, I'm doing it because I understand it and I love it and I'm into it. So it's all me. What's the beginning of it all? What has to be the basis of it all? Hajj b'hajj. The basic appreciation of the fact that what I'm doing because God wants it done. Do I enjoy it? I hope I do enjoy it. There's all sorts of parts of Yiddishkeit that we enjoy. There's all sorts of parts of Yiddishkeit we probably don't enjoy. I don't know too many people. There's some people, they're a little weird. There's some people who really love Tisha B'Av. They just love suffering. They think that Yiddishkeit and suffering go together. You have to suffer, and so if you're suffering, that's better. There's a guy in the mikveh. He's a friend of mine, right? But he whenever I'm in the mikveh with him, so he goes in the hot, then he goes in the cold, even in the winter. He goes in the cold, and he makes a point of making sure that you know he hates going in the cold. Right? So every now and then, we have an argument in the mikveh. Like, why are you? What are you doing? Oh, you have to go in the cold. This, I don't know. He got it in Flatbush. Somewhere he picked it up in Flatbush that you have to suffer. Suffering's good. Yeah, but he doesn't want you to suffer. Sometimes, unfortunately, you're put in a situation where the Abish is going to make you suffer. God forbid. It shouldn't happen to anybody. But it happens. It's not like we're looking for it. Right? Nothing like a freezing cold mikveh that's just miserable. Feels so religious. And he and I have had this out about this, right? Naked in the mikveh, right? And what's really interesting is what usually happens when you get into that is that actually all that suffering pushes you away from God because you're so impressed by yourself that you're willing to suffer for God that all you're thinking about is how holy you are and you forgot to think about God. Right? Oh, I'm so holy. I'm going in a cold mikveh. Aren't I great? Oh, fair. Right? What's toivel? Oisi is bittul. Why do we toivel in water? Because when you go into the water, what happens to you? You become just part of the water, right? You have no metzias. You're bottle. Toivel is oisi is bittul. Tefillah is all about bittul. When you're under there, think about that. Toivel is oisi is bittul. This isn't about me. It's about God. Why do I want to be in a higher level of purity? I want to be in a higher level of purity because my service of God should be better, not because I'll feel better about myself. Right? I might feel better about myself, which isn't a bad thing, but that's hopefully not why we're doing it. We're doing it because it'd be nice to be on a higher level of if it's possible, to be on an even higher level of Torah. Because for men, all it is what's called hosafat tahara, and adding Torah. Right? Women go to mikveh and it's real. They make a bracha. We go to mikveh and it just, it's part of what we do. But it's an Indian in bittul. It's the difference between the creatures who live underwater and the creatures who live in air. Fish are part of the water, like they're one with the water. Yes, they derive. You live in air, okay? So we're not exactly one with the air. Obviously, we need the air. We breathe the air. Right? The fish is just one with his environment. Part of it. You don't even see him down there when you look from the top. It's just there. When you look over air, you see everything that's there. So Hajj Bahid is the lowest level in a Veda. Right? Ki ein lo yishayches klal l'kedusha. If someone doesn't have that, shari ein lo gam madrega yeser chaynu shebaveda. If it's zeu, and now the Rebbe is going to explain, hashayches the lag be'emer le'inyan aveda the svir seimer. Why does lag be'emer fall out in svir seimer? Why is it lag be'emer? Why isn't it, I don't know, Yud Daled Kislev? I don't know. It'd be any day. Dehine, in the Rashbi, what's the Rashbi all about? What's unique about the Rashbi? Haya Shahaya Makasher, he connected Ha'omek Roim, the loftiest levels of reality. Omek means depth, Roim means loftiness, meaning the deepest ideas, which are therefore the loftiest ideas, the loftiest reality imaginable, Ima Omek Tachas, with the lowest level. Shalochen, in Izman Istalkus Shalo, therefore, the time of Istalkus, Sha'az Nizgala Omek Roim, B'Shara Shosher Ad Lamayla Lamayla, and it tells us in the Zohar about the fact, and we'll see this, we're going to learn for a few days, maybe even starting tomorrow, because we'll finish this and we can start that tomorrow also, that the Rashbi revealed on Lag Ba'emer, the revealed on the Yom Istalkus, he says, Ha'idno, now I've reached the level that I've always wanted to reach, a level of complete unity with the Eibishter, and he revealed levels of Torah that had never ever been revealed before and have not been revealed since. Revealed it all. on Lag Baimer. So he revealed the highest level of intellectual understanding possible. Torah. When? Dafka Lag Baimer. Connecting the highest level with the lowest level. Because below Lag Baimer, there's nothing. And the Rebbe will explain why. What about Yesod and Malchus? Haya belag Baimer Dafka. Dafka and Lag Baimer. Hoyd shebahoyd. Shenistayim az bitter hamidei shemitzad atzma. Hoyd shebahoyd is the end, nistayim, the conclusion, of the birder of the midas, the rectification of the midas, mitzad atzma, in terms of themselves. The last midah is hoyd. What's Yesod? Yesod is not a midah per se. Yesod is based on the fact that there's been a tremendous work with the midas from Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, and Hoyd. Yesod is the connection to another reality as a result of that emotional reality. The emotional reality ends in Hoyd, and what's Yesod is the expression of that reality that brings about a connection to the other. And that connection, Yesod, what does that bring about? Malchus, Machshava, Dibur, and Maisa. Which is what we saw when the Rebbe went through the Midah of Chesed. So the end of the Midas per se is Hoyd. So Hoyd Shebahoyd is the lowest level of Midah. Where is there any godliness? What the lowest level of godly reality in your emotional state is, at least you've got Hoyd Shebahoyd, as the Rebbe just said. I'm made it because I'm made it. I can't explain it. I don't understand it. I might not want, but I'm made it because it's true. It is what it is. Obviously I have to grow from that. But without that, I have nothing. That's the most basic. What's the first thing you say every single day? Without any intellectual appreciation, you haven't been mizbeinen, you haven't done anything. What's the first thing you say? Meida. First word you say is meida. You don't say ani modeh. You don't mention yourself first. Meida ani. Meida comes before ani. Haida'ah. Haid shebahaid. Meida ani lefanecha. The most basic expression of the Yid's appreciation of the fact that he exists in order to serve the Eibishter. And the Eibishter believes in him. Rabbi Emunah Sechel. That your belief in me is great. Such you gave me another day of life. Here I am again. And the first, after that initial appreciation of your own existence, which is the fact that you're now conscious, the first spark of consciousness. So the Rebbe says there's a level even beyond Meida, and that's Etzem and Nefesh, an appreciation of your Etzem Etzias. The first Pa'ula, the first action that you do is Hoyd, Meida. Because it's all based on that. Without that, there's nothing. If I can't be made, if I can't acknowledge the Eibishter, that doesn't mean I'm not keeping Shabbos and learning Torah, but it has nothing to do with the Eibishter. It has to do with me, my spiritual growth, my this, my that. What's necessary in order for it to have something to do with the Eibishter? Hoyd, which is the basis of it all. Now, why are you doing this? Maybe the Eibishter, that's what he wants, right? Should you also feel it, enjoy it? Yeah, absolutely. But again, it has to be within the context of that most basic hoda'ah. Reishis Aveda v'yikara v'sharsha, right? 41st chapter in Tanya, which we say every day before davening. Right? What's the Reishis Aveda v'yikara v'sharsha? Yira. That even though there's Ava, and Ava is a higher level than Yira, without Yira, what's Ava? Because Ava is very much, that doesn't mean that I'm not connected to the other. Of course I'm connected to the other. But there's very much a reality of Yesh Misha Oyev. There's the one who loves, there's me, and I'm expressing my love for this other person, and I like expressing that love. And so we talked about that when we talked about this in Chesed and Gvura. Gvura is a much greater state of bittul than Ava, than Chesed. Chesed is I want to reach out and help. Gvura is based on the details of this person's situation. I realize the help necessary is such and such and such and such. That's Chesed Shebegvura. Tiferes, as we said, was when a complete and total bittul of you, so you are just identifying with the other person completely and totally. It's all about them. That's tiferes. Meaning your compassion for them is you feel their reality, and therefore you give them. His pain is your pain, his simcha is your simcha. So the Rashbi is all about the connection of those two levels. Let's read another line or two and we will stop. Rashbi is all about connecting those two. Shalochem. Zman istalka shalai, the time of his passing. She'az nizgala oimek uroim. Then it was revealed the highest levels, b'shara shardashay ad lamayla mayla, the source of his source. And again, we'll see this more completely in the mimer that I'd like you to see after we finish this. Even though I'd love to after we'll finish the mimer, but I want at the beginning is extremely important in terms of understanding the level of the Rashbi.
Which mimer?
The next mimer we're going to learn the name of the mimer. It's in Malukot Gimel, and I forgot the name just was skipped out on me. What's the name of the mimer? So it's Malukot Gimel. Might be Lahavinin or Rashbi. Might be the name of the mimer. It's in Malukot Gimel. Mimer the Rebbe said in Tafshin Lamed Dalet. Haya belag b'emer dafka. Hoyd shebahoyd. Shenistayim az bira amida shemitzad atzim shemadrega yesa achreina. The lowest level, hoyd shebahoyd. Again, because Yesod and Malchus, they are midas, but they're not mamish midas. They're the expression of the midas in Yesod, which is connection, and Malchus, which is thought, speech, and action. Hine zman istalkish lo shegila az razin temirin, the hidden secrets, shelamayla gam mipnimi satar, which is beyond all of pnimi satar that had ever been revealed before or since. Haya, but when? Haya b'madrega yesar chanet dafka happened hoyche b'hoyd. One more line. Shezeu iskashrus. This is the connection. The oimek rum. Some people say im oimek dafus. The highest level and the lowest level, and that's the Rashbi. Now that's Torah in general. That's Panemius Torah even more. And we'll see. The Rebbe is going to teach us. We'll see this tomorrow. That Lag B'Omer is the Matan Torah of Panemius Torah, which, interesting enough, happened after Matan Torah, but every year happens before Matan Torah, because in order for Matan Torah to be what Matan Torah is supposed to be, there first has to be a Lag B'Omer. There has to be Kabbalah's Panemius Torah first, because then you'll appreciate what Torah is. That's Pneumis Torah. Okay. We'll stop there. We'll finish the mimer.
Thank you.
Repeat the last line of the Pneumis Torah. The hidden secret beyond the Pneumis Torah reveals his. That he revealed on Lag B'Omer, which is the expression of the lowest level of Veda, he revealed the highest levels of Torah. Shalamai Legami Pnimis Torah means the highest levels, even of any Pnimis Torah that have been revealed up until that point.
What?
We'll see, we'll wrap that up tomorrow.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm trying to, hopefully I will, learn mimer from Tavshim Mem Vav Vlog B'Omer, my birthday. And I'm trying to find a recording of it somewhere. I found the recording.
Saying the mimer?
I found the recording of the Rebbe saying the mimer, although he's saying it in Yiddish, and I have the mimer in Kaddish.
Right. Oh, you won't find a printed version of the mimer.
In Yiddish?
We don't have printed versions of my mimer in Yiddish. I once asked Rabbi Groner why. He said because the mimer is Torah B'Chsav, and Torah B'Chsav is written in Lashon Kodesh. Sikh is written in Yiddish because that's Torah B'Chsav.
Oh, absolutely.
That he said I've never heard he said he didn't hear it from the Rebbe, but that was always his understanding. Now there are mimer that are written in Yiddish. There's a whole sefer of them. my Maimer in Yiddish from the Friedrich Rebbe. But generally, my Maimer are written in Lashon HaKodesh. They were all said in Yiddish. They were written in Lashon HaKodesh.
That makes more sense.
We haven't, just to contextualize the mimer, we haven't yet seen in this mimer why Hod is below Malchus and Yisod and all that, correct? We haven't, we kind of have.
It's not below Malchus. It's the lowest of the Midos.
Ah, okay. Because it's so.
Means
I am.
no, but also what Yesod is and what Malchus is. What's Yesod? Yesod is the connection because of my emotional reality, which is Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, and Hod. So that brings about a connection to something, because emotions are connection. Emotions are my connection to something outside of me. Right? Okay, so that's Yesod. Yesod is the connection to something else. By virtue of my connection to, now, in terms of the Eibishter, therefore, my connection to God. And as a result of that connection, then my Malchus, thought, speech, and action will be in godly things. Now, it'll be in Gashmistic things, in terms of my emotional connection to this Gashmistic reality. Therefore, I'll feel connection to it. I'll identify with it, Yesod, and therefore I'll think about it all day long. So I'll call myself a Yankees fan. Right? Okay? So I identify that. So therefore I'm going to think, speak, and talk a lot about, think, speak, and do a lot about the Yankees. Why? Well, I define myself that way.
And that's Yisod.
Yesod is the connection and therefore the definition. Malchus is the thought, speech, and action. Where's that coming from? An emotional connection to all of that. What's the most basic expression of that? Hod.
And why not Netzach? And Netzach is not. It's victory. It's whatever.
Netzach Netzach is also a lower expression of it all, but the lowest of the low is Hod, which is basic bittul.
Okay.
And Hod Shebahod is bittul shebabittul. Why are you butler?
Yeah.
Butler. I mean, why is
sort of the infinite zero? You can't
why
break.
is God God? Because He's God, right? I talk to a chacham about that. He'll explain it to you intellectually. Say to talk to the simple person. Right? I remember once a discussion going on in Zal. This is in the yeshiva, which was the first Gilgul of Mayanot. So, this discussion going on in Zal on the other side of Shaliach and one of the students. And then I heard those dreaded words, let's go ask Rabbi Kaplan. For those who always hate hearing that. So they walked across Zal. I didn't know what they were talking about. I just heard they were having some heated conversation over there. So they came over. And so they're arguing who's going to ask me the question. Okay, so
That was a great sign.
I don't remember who asked me the question. But the question was, why do we wear our hat the way we wear our hat? So the student wanted to say that it's all in having a shin on top, and they had a whole Torah about it. And the shaliach, I didn't know this, right? They just asked me the question, but it turns out that the student was explaining all the pneumius of the shin up top. And the shaliach said, okay, that's true, but we wear it the way we wear it because that's what we wear. Right? So they came to ask me, he said, why do we wear a hat the way we wear a hat? So I said, because that's how the Lubavitchers wear a hat. Oh, so the shaliach was over the moon. I didn't know who had what position. I didn't even know what the discussion was. All I know is that I made the shaliach happy because then they explained to me later what the discussion was. So what's that? That's it. Not that I'm holding there. I'm just saying that answer is Hod Shebahod. Yeah. Why do we do it? Because. Yeah. We do it because. Right? That's just why we do it. Right? Okay. Is there